Imagine a silent army of gray giants, weighing over 1,000 pounds each, slipping quietly into the tea-colored waters of the Florida Everglades. For a long time, the survival of the Florida manatee was hanging by a thread, caught in a battle between habitat loss and a changing environment. But recently, the state of Florida embarked on an audacious biological gamble. They didn't just release a few rehabilitated animals. They orchestrated a massive reintroduction program that saw 3,000 manatees pushed back into the wild heart of the glades. Scientists and conservationists held their breath, wondering if these gentle sea cows could actually reclaim a territory that had become increasingly hostile. But when the tracking data started pouring in and the first aerial surveys were completed, what came back wasn't just a success story. It was incredible. The manatees didn't just survive. They began to fundamentally re-engineer the entire ecosystem of southern Florida in ways that no one, not even the experts, saw coming. Today we are going deep into the swamps to witness a transformation that proves nature doesn't just recover, it fights back with a vengeance. To understand why this release was such a high-stakes move, you have to realize that the Everglades isn't just a swamp. It is a massive, slow-moving river of grass. For decades, the water quality in this region has been a major concern. Runoff and pollution had led to the loss of seagrass, which is the primary food source for manatees. Without food, the manatees were forced into smaller and smaller pockets of habitable water, often huddling around power plant discharge pipes just to stay warm in the winter. The decision to release 3,000 individuals back into the wild was essentially a shock to the system. It was an attempt to use the manatees themselves as a biological tool to fix the very environment they rely on. The first incredible thing that happened was a phenomenon scientists are calling the grazing effect. Manatees are often called the lawnmowers of the ocean, but in the Everglades, they became something much more powerful. As 3,000 manatees began to graze on overgrown aquatic vegetation, they didn't just clear the water, they unlocked a trapped cycle of nutrients. For years, invasive plants had been choking the waterways, preventing sunlight from reaching the bottom and creating stagnant, low-oxygen zones. By eating their way through these blockages, the manatees effectively restarted the plumbing of the Everglades. Within mere months of the release, satellite imagery showed a dramatic increase in water clarity in the primary manatee corridors. This wasn't just a win for the manatees, it was a win for every fish, turtle, and bird that calls the glades home. But the real shocker came when biologists started tracking the social behavior of the released groups. We used to think of manatees as relatively solitary creatures, mostly just congregating where the water was warm. But this massive release revealed a complex culture of survival. The 3,000 manatees began to organize themselves into specific scouting parties. Older, more experienced manatees, some of whom had been rehabilitated after injuries, were observed leading younger, captive-born manatees through the labyrinth of the Everglades mangrove tunnels. They were teaching them the ancient maps of the water, showing them secret freshwater springs that haven't been seen by human eyes in decades. This transfer of knowledge was incredible to witness because it proved that manatees have a collective memory. They weren't just animals being dumped into a swamp. They were a community reclaiming their ancestral kingdom. As the manatees spread out, they began to interact with other iconic Florida species in ways that surprised everyone. Conservationists reported seeing manatees actually cooperating with local alligator populations. Now, you might think an alligator would see a manatee as a meal, but manatees are so thick-skinned and large that adult alligators usually give them a wide berth. In a strange turn of events, the manatees clearing the thick vegetation created highways for alligators to move more easily through the marshes. In return, the presence of alligators kept smaller predators away from manatee calves. It became a symbiotic relationship that stabilized the middle of the food web. The Everglades began to look less like a struggling habitat and more like a finely tuned machine where every gear was finally turning again. Then there was the manatee bloom. This is the part of the story that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. The scientists noticed that in the areas with the highest manatee density, the seagrass wasn't just coming back, it was coming back stronger. It turns out that manatee waste is one of the most potent fertilizers for the specific types of seagrass that the Everglades needs to thrive. As the 3,000 manatees moved through the system, they were effectively planting the next generation of their own food supply. The nutrient-rich waste provided exactly what the sandy soil needed to anchor new growth. This created a positive feedback loop. More manatees led to more fertilizer, which led to more seagrass, which allowed for even more manatees. Within 1 year, The incredible result was a 20% increase in seagrass coverage in the southern glades, a feat that human engineers had spent decades and millions of dollars trying to achieve without success. However, the release wasn't without its challenges. The researchers had to keep a close eye on cold stress. Manatees are tropical animals, and if the water temperature drops too low, their bodies start to shut down. During the first winter after the release, a major cold front swept through Florida. The team was terrified that they would see a massive loss of the 3,000 individuals they had worked so hard to return to the wild. But this is where the incredible part of the manatee's biology kicked in. Instead of just huddling in the usual spots, the manatees displayed a new behavior called deep hole huddling. They found deep thermal pockets in the limestone floor of the Everglades, places where the Earth's natural heat keeps the water significantly warmer than the surface. They packed themselves into these holes by the hundreds, sharing body heat in a way that had never been documented on this scale. They had adapted their survival strategy to the specific geography of the Everglades, proving that they are much more versatile and intelligent than we ever gave them credit for. As the program entered its second year, the results moved from successful to transformative. The presence of the manatees began to affect the weather and air quality in the region. Because the water was clearer and the vegetation was better managed, the swamp gas levels, methane produced by rotting, ungrazed vegetation, dropped significantly. The Everglades were breathing better. Local residents and airboat captains started reporting that the air felt fresher and the water smelled cleaner. It turns out that manatees are essentially the lungs of the Florida wetlands. By keeping the plant life in check and the water moving, they prevent the stagnation that leads to poor air and water quality. The scientific community across the globe took notice. This Florida project became a blueprint for rewilding efforts everywhere. The idea is simple but revolutionary. Stop trying to fix nature using human technology and start using keystone species to do the work. A keystone species is one that has a disproportionately large effect on its natural environment relative to its abundance. The 3,000 manatees proved that they are the ultimate keystone of the American South. Their return didn't just add one species back to the list. It redefined the entire list of who could survive in the Everglades. But what about the people? The release had a massive effect on the local economy and culture. Tourism in the areas surrounding the Everglades shifted from adventure-based to ecology-based. People weren't just coming to zoom around on airboats. They were coming to see the great return. The manatees became celebrities. But unlike the manatees in Crystal River or other tourist hubs, these manatees were different. They were wilder, faster, and more elusive. They were Everglades manatees. They developed a darker, more camouflaged skin tone to blend into the tannin-stained waters. They became the ghosts of the swamp, seen only by a ripple on the surface or a sudden spout of water as they came up for air. The tracking data revealed that some of these manatees were traveling incredible distances. One individual, dubbed the Explorer by the research team, traveled from the release site in the southern Everglades all the way up to the Georgia border and back within a single season. This indicated that the manatee highways were working. They were connecting fragmented habitats that had been cut off from each other for a century. This movement is crucial for genetic diversity. By moving between different populations, these 3,000 pioneers ensures that the Florida manatee genome remains healthy and resilient against future challenges. One of the most heartwarming, incredible results was the baby boom. Biologists expected a few calves, but the census taken 18 months after the release showed a record number of new births. Life in the wild Everglades, despite its dangers, was apparently exactly what the manatees needed to boost their reproductive rates. The abundance of space and the absence of heavy boat traffic, which is strictly regulated in these parts of the Everglades, created a manatee sanctuary that functioned better than any captive breeding program ever could. The sight of mothers nursing their calves in the shade of ancient mangroves became a symbol of the project's success. As we look at the footage from the aerial drones, you can see the manatee trails carved into the grass. These trails are now being used by hundreds of other species. Small fish hide in the wake of the manatees to avoid predators. Wading birds like egrets and herons follow the manatees to catch the insects and small crustaceans that are stirred up during grazing. The manatee has become a primary provider for the entire avian population of the Florida park system. It's a cascading effect of life. The project also shed light on the incredible health resilience of these animals. Many of the 3,000 manatees had been treated for various ailments before their release. The scientists found that once they were back in the natural mineral-rich waters of the Everglades, their healing rates skyrocketed. The natural tannins in the water, the same stuff that makes it look like tea, have mild antiseptic properties. This natural pharmacy of the Everglades helped the manatees keep their skin healthy and their immune system strong. It was as if the environment and the animals were designed to work together, and they were finally reunited after a long separation. But the story doesn't end with just the manatees. The incredible comeback has sparked a movement to protect the entire Great Florida River. If 3,000 manatees could do this much good for the Everglades, imagine what could happen if we restored more of the natural water flow from Lake Okeechobee. The manatees have become the ambassadors for a larger environmental movement. They are the face of the fight for clean water. Every time a manatee is spotted in a newly cleared channel, it's a reminder that nature is ready to bounce back if we just give it a little bit of help. The scientists who managed the release are still in awe of the data. They emphasize that the success of this project wasn't just about the number 3,000. It was about the timing and the location. By choosing the Everglades, a massive, protected wilderness, they gave the manatees a fighting chance. They removed the modern hazards of boat propellers and urban pollution and replaced them with the natural challenges of the wild. And the manatees answered that challenge with an incredible display of biological power. This project has also changed how we think about animal intelligence. For a long time, people thought manatees were just fat and slow. But the 3,000 residents of the Everglades have shown they are masters of spatial mapping and social cooperation. They have a deep understanding of their world, and they have the ability to manipulate it to their advantage. They aren't just passive residents of the swamp. They are the founding fathers of a new version of the Everglades. As we move into the future, the Florida 3000 will continue to be studied. They represent a living laboratory for how we can save other species and other habitats. The lesson is clear. When you put the right animals in the right place and let them do what they evolved to do, the results are nothing short of miraculous. The incredible thing that came back from the Everglades wasn't just a population of animals. It was a vision of what the world can look like when we work with nature instead of against it. The manatees are still out there right now, hidden in the mangroves, munching on grass, and quietly changing the world. They don't know they are part of a massive scientific study. They don't know they are symbols of hope. They are just living their lives, doing the work of the sea cow. But for us, watching from the outside, their story is a powerful reminder that it is never too late to make a difference. 3,000 individuals were enough to turn the tide for one of the most famous ecosystems on Earth. Imagine what else we could achieve if we applied this same level of commitment to other parts of our planet. The manatee mix in the Everglades is a blueprint for the 21st century. It's a story about restoration, resilience, and respect. The gentle giants of Florida have shown us that the heart of the Glades is still beating, and it is beating stronger than it has in 100 years. The next time you see a ripple in the water or a dark shape beneath the surface of a Florida canal, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey of the manatee. They are the guardians of the water, the gardeners of the grass, and the survivors of a world that almost forgot them. The release of 3,000 manatees was a leap of faith into the dark waters of the unknown. And what came back was a bright, thriving, and incredible future for the Sunshine State. The Everglades are no longer just a place of mystery and danger. They are a place of recovery and rebirth. And at the center of it all, moving at a steady, peaceful pace, is the manatee, the animal that proved that even the biggest problems can be solved by a few thousand dedicated friends working together in the mud and the grass. Stay tuned to the stories of our wildlife, because every time we look closer at nature, we find something even more incredible than what we went looking for. The Florida manatee is just one example of the wonders waiting to be discovered in our own backyard. Whether it is in the depths of the ocean or the heart of a swamp, the natural world is always ready to surprise us with its strength and its beauty. The Great Return is underway, and it is the most incredible show on Earth. The tracking sensors continue to beep, the drones continue to fly, and the seagrass continues to grow. The story of the Florida 3000 is still being written every single day in the quiet corners of the Everglades. It is a story without an end, because as long as there is water, and as long as there is grass, there will be manatees, reminding us that the incredible is always just beneath the surface. Keep your eyes on the water, because the next big discovery is probably staring right back at you with a pair of small, curious eyes from the middle of the river of grass.